study of organisms and their physical surroundings. And it's such a broad and inclusive study that one can never complete the ecological study, but you can certainly jump in and begin. And my own beginning of my ecological investigation of Oregon was 21 years ago. And so for the last 21 years, I've been studying the plants, the animals, animal tracking, birds, bird language, trees, plant identification, and then medicinal uses of plants and interacting with the landscape through edible plants, medicinal plants, and deeper levels of animal tracking where you're trying to get into the animal's mind and understand their habits and what they're going to do and anticipate their movements by getting into their thought process and understanding what an animal's doing across the landscape. A swale moves rainwater, and so in our landscape there is no full-time spring. There is a swale, it's a depression in the land that is moving the rainwater from the hillside, from my property, the hillside of the Silton estate, and then my neighborhood of the residential plots. And each one of the residential plots has to be 5 acres or so. So you have this area that's moving rainwater, and it moves it all down to a reservoir on the Diack property, the Diack farm, and Sam's land. And so this was kind of the beginning of my rekindling of my connection with Sam, was that I was already sharing rainwater with him, and it was going onto his property and filling a reservoir that then releases into a stream that goes through his forested property, the forested preserve of the Sandy River Preserve of the Nature Conservancy, and down to the Sandy River. And so when I approached Sam, I let him know that I met him originally in the year 2000, but I was on an AmeriCorps team, and there was a number of us that had met Sam that year. And I came to learn that Sam was often meeting people from the AmeriCorps world and from the ecological world and from Worlds of Learning and Reed College and Portland State University. And so Sam was meeting a lot of people, and it's not that Sam really remembered me, but Sam remembered the context in which we met. And so he was glad to rekindle that connection, and certainly was open to discussion about the landscape and about the Sandy River Preserve and about his legacy of living there.
I'm Sam Diack. I've lived here for 40 years now. I am 77, soon to be 78. Plan on staying here for the rest of my time. It's like my uncle said, he calls this his cathedral. And I feel the same way. I was raised here, and it's church to me.
It is awe-inspiring.
Yes, it is.
The first time you drop down into this property, it is, if you're not awe-inspired, then you're either numb or you're not paying attention.
Exactly. That's right. The property was purchased by the family in 1941, so that predates my birth by 2 years. So I've essentially been here all my life, with occasional forays to college and high school and so forth.
You did go on a boating trip to Hawaii at one point, right? On a craft that you built?
I built a 56-foot schooner with another friend, and yes, we sailed in the Pacific for quite some time.
That is amazing.
Yep.
I have in my notes that on December 31st, 1979, you and Connie moved back to the land. And who is Connie?
Connie is my wife. We were married in 1981. We've been together since 1976. We moved out here to the farm, to the old farmhouse, New Year's Eve of 1979, and have been here ever since. So that's 40 years.
Right, that's some time.
Pushing 41.
This cabin that we're hanging out at here, when was the cabin built?
This cabin, being a replacement for one that was lost in the flood of '64, this cabin was then built in '66, I believe.
Wow, that flood, the water came all the way up here?
No,
Oh,
The other cabin was on the existing floodplain,
okay.
and it got wiped out. And that was my uncle's cabin. My family also had a cabin just downstream from that. It didn't get wiped out, but it had 4 feet of silt in it.
Okay.
So that was quite an event.
So speaking of cabins, I know that there was the small cabin on this property at one point where the Reed College students would summer.
That was the cabin that I was raised in.
You were raised in that cabin.
Right. Well, I mean, during the summers, we'd spend all summer out here working the farm.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's talk about your father and your uncle, and what were their names?
My father was Sam Diack.
Okay.
My uncle was Arch Diack. Both doctors. My uncle was a general surgeon. My father was an internal medicine doc. Boy, what about them? Great people. My father was very interested in education of all sorts. Very important. He was involved in establishing the Oregon Graduate Center, OGI. He was known as the father of OMSI.
The father of OMSI.
Yes. He's on the Medical Research Foundation board. Lots of educational stuff. My uncle, the surgeon, artist, inventor, humorist, he actually invented the external portable defibrillator, which is now ubiquitous worldwide. You know, they're in taxi cabs and airplanes.
Right, big deal in saving lives.
Big deal. And he invented that up on the hill at OHSU. And he, with the funds that he realized from that invention when he bailed out, he established the Diack Ecology Education Program, which is right now a very active small group of us. There are 5 of us on a grant committee, and we give away close to $100,000 a year in individual grants to teachers K through 12 throughout the state, so that they can do field-based science inquiry ecology education with their students.
Oh, okay.
And this is what Archie was all about.
That leads me to the Reed College study. Now, it started in 1974, and it went solid till 1996, and then there were studies done all the way up until 2004.
They're still going on.
The Reed College studies are still happening.
They're still happening. And this was the result of my uncle and aunts. They established a fund to provide a stipend through the biology department at Reed College for students to come out and do independent field research in all kinds of studies, from inventories to, well, you see these
journals.
These journals. They produced probably a good half dozen doctorates at this point. Some very amazing field studies.
Sam was gracious enough to allow me to study the journals in the early winter of 2019. I poured through all of them, and there were 2 students in particular that really caught my attention, and we've spoken of them before, but let's talk for a moment about first Leo Shapiro, because his study came before, and then Steve Silton.
Leo Shapiro, you know, it's been a while since I've gone through his Reed College, thesis stuff, but he wound up at the Cornell ornithology labs, and he was studying vocalizations of birds.
Okay.
It gets very out there, very
deep. Yeah. But he came and visited you recently, right?
In the last 2 years.
Yeah, so you keep in contact. I mean, this was 1985, and
right.
these students have kept in contact.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Many of them. I mean, many of them are off and gone someplace. But yeah, this was, I would say they're summer stays out here were formative in their lives.
They all cite you and Connie as being gracious hosts and accommodating research partners to understand the land out here.
We had to sort of be parents as well.
Yeah,
because
sure.
these were college
Students.
students. So sometimes that got a little interesting, but no, a great experience all the way around.
And now Steve Silton's somebody that a lot of people in the greater ecology community might recognize because he pioneered the study of treetop ecology and really getting to understand the forest canopy from above. And you helped him develop a technique for tree climbing, correct?
Actually, yeah, he came as a very rash, if not brash, young man saying he can do anything. Well, you get into the old growth across the river. He wants to study the epiphyt lichens in the canopy of the old growth. Well, how do you get up there? First branch is like 90 feet up. Well, you're not going to climb it with spikes.
Right.
So I cobbled together a wrist rocket, Plamo wrist rocket slingshot with a spinning reel on it, and was able to shoot fishing line over these high limbs. Use that as a messenger to pull a rope up. Then he'd start climbing the rope with ascenders. And I would belay him on the ground, which is a good thing because he made a couple of very stupid moves and missed a jump. He would have fallen 90 feet to his death, no question. But
So you kind of saved the future of treetop ecology.
a lot of people might recognize him from reading National Geographic a few years back. There was a huge fold out in the National Geographic of the redwood tree. And here's Steve at the very top of the redwood tree.
Right, because he went on to then teach at Humboldt.
He has an endowed chair at Humboldt State.
Humboldt State, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, where the big trees are.
He's climbed the biggest trees in the world.
So these students, they were studying your forest, but as we've mentioned, the old growth is across the river.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a tract of land that is owned and managed by the Bureau of Land Management.
Correct.
And
it's an ACEC.
Right, an area of critical environmental concern.
Correct.
And the professor behind that was a man named Dr. Bert Brem.
Dr. Bert Brem, Reed College, biology department.
I have something that he wrote that said the Diack's intent was twofold: to protect the site and cause further preservation of the Sandy River and its tributaries, and to stimulate education and extensive scientific study of the area.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that puts it very, very nicely.
And that this area is one of the last vestiges of low elevation Cascade riparian old growth.
That's correct, and that's because of the geography of the Sandy River Gorge. This is a gorge, and it's headed by a glacier. So all that alpine influence comes down this gorge, and it makes things think they are actually higher than they are.
Oh yeah,
But it's low elevation. It's only 400 feet.
it's 400 feet, but I have found monkey flowers that are more comfortable up at 6,000 feet.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I had come to know Sam through the workings in 2000 with AmeriCorps, but I reintroduced myself to Sam in 2017 and then again in 2018. And I asked him in 2018 if I could begin a project where I was studying the journals from the Reed College studies. And I knew that the Reed College studies had taken place, and I knew that they began in the 70s, and I knew that they were an important ecological study that was done of the Sandy River. It was a very general survey of collecting information about all of the plants and animals and bird species that these students were seeing, and that the information was being added to by Sam and his wife, who had lived there for so many years. And so this body of information was growing year after year, and was added to by 2 Reed College students every summer. And they were chosen to live on the property, and they were chosen to create a study of their own under the guidance of Dr. Bert Brem, who was the professor who oversaw this. And the money was being given by Archie Diack. And so the Diack family was this huge force in not only conservation, because they owned the land that became the Sandy River Preserve, but also in study, education, and science, because they were funding this yearly study that Reed College was doing, and that they were also living the life, so that they were providing the context for the students to stay, and the property and the support that you would need to have food and have shelter and be able to live out there all summer long and record your findings. And so Sam allowed me to be in his cabin, a couple times a week, and he would give me a couple of hours, and I would go through these journals. He had the hard copies of the Reed College studies starting in 1974, and I would go through each one of them and read and take photographs and take notes. And originally I was thinking that I would write a book about Sam, but I came to see that everything I was seeing needed to be seen with the camera, that there was so much to see and so much to observe, and only so many ways to write and describe about these things. And so the idea of bringing a camera in and recording observation began to be very important.
All right, Sam, let's talk about the land here. I have in my notes that the original purchase was 288 acres.
Back in 41, yeah.
Back in 1941.
Right.
And it was, I have written down that it was $4,000.
Yeah. Times have changed. Times have changed radically.
And now, out of that 288 acres, some of it was some of it across the river.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it essentially was 3/4 of a mile, both sides of the Sandy River. And the bulk on this side, of course, on the west side.
Yes. I've surveyed some of it with your cousin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so it is still a family property. There are parts of it in your name, parts of it in her name, and
at this point, the bulk of it is Nature Conservancy.
and that's what I was going to get into, is the Nature Conservancy, 156 acres.
That was the gift in the early 70s, right?
Now, this was the beginning of the Nature Conservancy of Oregon's campaign to protect land through purchasing, correct?
Through donation and purchasing, yes.
Donation and purchasing. And
there was only one other preserve in Oregon when we approached their office in San Francisco with the idea of handing this property over to them.
I mean, this was some landmark stuff. This kicked off the Nature Conservancy of Oregon, then went on to protect more land along the Sandy River.
Yes.
Notable with the Cornwall Tract, the Blue Hole Tract, and patchwork of land that really protected the Sandy River Canyon, 6 miles worth of land.
That was the whole idea of the original gift, was a seed to start preservation of the Sandy River Gorge. Yes.
So, and really started a nationwide domino effect, a movement, if you will, of protecting land through the donation, purchase, and converting private land into conservation zones.
Correct.
And it's really quite a thing when you study it to see how far that rippled forward.
Well, I can't say that this particular donation was responsible for the international push. It was all part of it. But now, I mean, the Nature Conservancy is the largest conservation organization on the planet.
Right.
And I can't say that we're responsible for that. But
that's a mighty big responsibility to claim. But in the history of things, what started here kept rolling. The ball kept rolling all the way to. I have been snorkeling at a preserve in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, that is Nature Conservancy land.
Yes.
So it's gone far.
Well, especially in our case, it got TNC into Oregon.
Yes.
And they now have, gosh, I think probably over 350, 400,000 acres in the state.
That's a lot of land in
Yes.
Oregon.
Yes.
Yeah. And then bringing it back to the land here, but you've spoken to me about there were 2 logging operations in this forest.
Well, you can see right here, this is all beautiful timber. We probably took out in an extremely selective logging process 3 times as much timber as you see right here. And now we have more than when we started the logging operation. Because of the selectivity, it allowed all this stuff to really thrive. Yeah, it was a great operation. It also built this road.
Yeah, and the road too.
Yeah. This is the ash swale. This is normally this time of year that would be all water. That's all Oregon ash in there. So you've got this diversity. The firs, the ash, of course, the big leaf maples. It's just an amazing thing to walk around and see how much different stuff there is.
And as far as the animals go, you have a herd of elk, maybe multiple herds of elk that are here.
Yeah.
You've spoken about bears, mountain lions.
Oh, yes.
And then all of the maybe lesser seen creatures. There are bobcats that are here.
Yes.
There are bald eagles that hang out here, that fly up and down the river here.
Right.
And just share maybe one notable animal encounter experience.
A couple of weeks ago, my wife, just right up here at this corner in the road, she was walking down the road solo, and mama bear and 2 cubs crossed the road, and Connie just started backing up because she was only 50 feet away from them.
Yeah.
And she just didn't run, but did a steady pace backwards. Normally, we wouldn't care, but a mother and 2 cubs.
Right, the little cause for concern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want to get in between them.
No.
But you and Connie have learned to live with the animals, more or less. I mean,
We have we have no choice. They're at the front door all the time. Elk, deer, bear. The bear gets in our garden every year. What the heck? You just got to watch where you step, right?
one thing I did want to cover was that you have been a woodworker, carpenter, builder of things pretty much your entire adult life, correct?
Correct.
And so does that inform your relationship with the forest? I mean, that I like to build as well. So, I walk through the trees and there is that understanding that the trees are there for the animals, but also when they can give of themselves, we could build. And
Not from the Nature Conservancy property.
no, I'm not saying that you're not harvesting from this land anymore.
No,
but
no.
Does that inform your relationship with the land?
I love trees. Everything they do for me. I mean, I could sit here all day and just look at the moss patterns on. I mean, these are magnificent.
And speaking of looking all day, that could then kind of calls me back to your uncle's art. Some of his drawings, they're evident that he was looking all day. That he was sitting and looking into the trees and understanding kind of what he was seeing.
Well, he did an entire portfolio of his etchings, maybe 15 of them, all of trees. All kinds of trees from all over the world, but trees. Love trees. And he was really connected to those. We're in the grouse homestead here right now.
Oh, okay.
You have to be very careful driving up and down this road, because they'll just stand in the middle of the road and look at you. And so you got to honk or wait.
Right, go at their pace. You can't
let them walk away. Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about the importance of ecology and really its study and practice for the future as we go through so many of the environmental problems that we face.
Well, if we don't study ecology, which is the interrelationship of all living things, then we're never going to get a handle on the environment, which is the result of that interrelationship of all living things. So it's important. Yeah. Without that understanding, I don't see how we can move forward to improve things.
Right.
Or correct things.
We do need people that we can rely on for their expertise and knowledge of the interrelation of
Right.
all things. And,
Right.
And as you said, I know that there has been a study of deep ecology, but when I look at ecology, it's like a river. Sometimes it's deep and sometimes it's shallow, but you need to study the whole thing to come to understanding, to a grasp of understanding of
Yes. And the interconnections.
those connections between the grouse and the trees and the,
Yep.
and the ash and the whole thing.
Yep.
So, any words of wisdom for the future that maybe we're tossing the football down. We really need the future to take to this, to really want to embrace the study of because ecology is not just a study; it's kind of a way of life.
We have to try and build an appreciation for it, along with the education of it. Without that appreciation, we're not going to move forward. I think of kids that have never spent the night out in the woods, ever, or adults for that matter. How are they going to appreciate anything if they don't get out and be in it?
Right. How are they going to armchair quarterback forest management for Oregon?
They can't do it.
They can't without some understanding of
Right.
the ecology and the interrelation of the species.
They have to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. Get people caring about it, and maybe we can save it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I began to see that each one of these students thanked Sam and his wife Connie, and that there was a lot of gratitude for the support that Sam and Connie were providing to the students, and that these students went on to have impactful careers in biology, wildlife biology, ecology, and various other branches of science. And so you had this student body that was going on to really contribute to the world around them. And there was one student in particular who stood out. His name is Steve Sillett. And what stands out about Steve is that he pioneered a technique of climbing large trees. And this allowed him to get way up into the canopy of the Doug firs here. And he took this technique and style and went on to pioneer the study of the upper canopy in redwood trees, Redwood National Park, and the different redwood pockets in Northern California. And he's a professor at Humboldt State. And so he went on to form a very illustrious career. But this technique of tree climbing was something that Sam was particularly proud of, because Sam had helped contribute his own thoughts to how it would be done. And so Sam was his mentor and worked with Steve, brought him across the river and helped him find the largest trees to climb. And Steve left this legacy of maps in his journal, and he has it marked on the maps where the trees that he climbed are, and he gave them names. And so the one tree, Bombadil, was supposed to be this giant of the forest. And I got very inspired by the study of these journals to go and find this giant. And but I wanted to go in the winter, and so I couldn't take I don't even have a kayak to get across. So I had to walk in, and the way to walk in is very long. but I found it. I used his maps and I found the tree bombadil, and I took a video of it in the winter where it was raining and everything was very wet, and it had been a woolly adventure to get there, as it were.
Sam, I'm here by one of the larger Doug fir trees. I have no idea if this is the tree that Steve climbed or if this is the log that you got jammed on, but maybe. I'm going to use this video as reference. There are some large fir trees around. This one is probably the biggest, and I am directly across from Indian John Island. The south tip of the island is over there. So we'll discuss.
So I took a video and I shared it with Sam, and I was like, Sam, is this the tree? Is this bombadil? And he was like, that was a long time ago. Maybe. He's like, it looked like he got close. And it was where it was on the map. So that was one of the wonderful parts about kind of going through the past and connecting it to the present, because that tree must be 500 years old at least. And it is still standing and part of a forest that has been growing and living for the last 15,000 years at least. And so climate conditions changed to make it possible at the end of the Ice Age for the lowland old growth temperate rainforest, lowland old growth to grow. And so we know that the forest is at least 15,000 years old. The first time I came to this property, we're here at the Diack track, but the first time I ever came here was 20 years ago, and I was with the AmeriCorps Northwest team. We were the Northwest EnviroCorps team, and we were planting trees and we were learning about this area. I was new to the area, and but when they took us to this property, we stopped here, and the sign was vibrant then, and this property was open to the public. There's a whole nother story about why it's not open to the public, but there is the illustration of Dr. Arch Diack, the inventor of the heart defibrillator, and the Sam's dad, Dr. Sam Diack, known as the father of OMSI, physician, educator, and fisherman. This property has had a huge impact on my life over the years. Here's the map of the trails. And it's not because I hung out here so much, because I really didn't until I moved out to this area, but it's because I met Sam and I knew that I had a role model in somebody that could be a caretaker of an amazing piece of property, and kind of somebody who was a living, breathing model of ecology and interaction with the land. So we are here now at the kiosk, and today we drove down the road, down to the cabin where Sam likes to hang out by the river. Now, this area of critical environmental concern, what is so special about it, it is a lowland, temperate, old-growth forest. And so that's a lot of words, but it's basically an old-growth forest that exists at lower elevations on the west slope of Mount Hood. And this area used to be covered by the lowland old-growth forest, and the key species of lowland old-growth forest are western red cedar and Douglas fir and western hemlock. They're the three largest trees in that forest, with the Douglas fir getting to be gigantic at the lower elevations, so from sea level to 1,000 feet, say. And most of this area of the critical concern is down around elevation between 50 and 100 feet. And so it is truly low elevation forest, and it receives a good amount of rain throughout the year, and it's never that cold. And so even when it's freezing, it's only freezing for long enough that the winter is certainly tolerable and things can continue growing. And so there is this vibrancy about the forest. The forest has been protected because of its inaccessibility. And so because it's down at the bottom of a canyon, the idea of getting machinery down there in the days before World War I was just absurd. It was kind of too out of the way to bring the machines in that you needed, the hand saws and the donkey punches and the equipment of pre-World War I logging it's very heavy, and it involves a lot of human power, and it involves a lot of mud and muck, and it's a dirty job. And they didn't want to go down into that canyon. And then World War I comes around, and the tree of choice becomes the Sitka spruce. The Sitka spruce does not grow in the Sandy River Canyon, and the logging operations move all of that equipment and manpower to the Coast Range and began cutting there because the Sitka spruce is the most important tree for the building of World War I aircraft. And so because the aircraft were built out of this wood, it became the most important product to pull out of the forest. No longer was the building of San Francisco so important. And so the Douglas fir that was being exported to California stopped becoming a priority tree. After World War I, and there's that lull of time where logging operations continued in Oregon, but during the Great Depression, logging operations slowed down considerably. And so you had another kind of chance event go on a national scale that slowed the logging and protected the Sandy River Canyon from being clear-cut. And then you had the war, World War II, where the human power was redirected elsewhere, and when they came back after the war, the chainsaw becomes improved and very important in logging. And so the chainsaw is able to get down into the Sandy River Canyon, but now you have a new populace of people home from the war and beginning their livelihoods and their careers. And you have Arch Diack, who was in the war and developed the portable defibrillator and the heart starter and used that on the battlefield, but then was able to bring it back to civilian life, and he had the patent. And so he made quite a bit of money off of that. And he was one of those people of that generation who had a vision larger than life, and his vision was to protect the entire Sandy River Canyon. And with him and people like him coming together and sharing a unified vision of protecting a canyon for the enjoyment of the people, tying back to that idea that the people have been living with the forest for so long, millions of years of human evolution, even though our society seems to have taken a break from that connection. That connection's still very much alive, and it was very much alive in Arch Diack and in his brother Sam Sr. And it through his fortune and through his own brilliance, which generated his fortune, he was able to kind of put his money where his mouth is and protect the large tracts of land and generate the interest from the powerful, important people to help protect the entire Sandy River Canyon. And that is why the lowland old growth remains, is because people couldn't get there, and then once people could get in there with the lighter equipment, they didn't want to anymore, and they wanted to protect it for a place to fish and to kayak and to allow the forest just to continue to grow and study it. And so because of the Reed College studies, it's actually one of the most studied areas of critical concern within the entire Bureau of Land Management's portfolio of care. And so it has so much information that has been written and collected about it. And this is a wonderful thing, but it is also something that awareness needs to be brought, and so that the next generation understands that there is this whole database, this whole generations of study and understanding that is accessible, and that the new generations can come in and tap into that and learn about what is in the old growth forest and what makes up an area of critical environmental concern.
We are here at the boundary between the property and the natural area.
And when the Nature Conservancy was custodian of this land, it was called the Partridge Tract. And each one of the Nature Conservancy preserves along the river had a name.
and but they are all now being overseen by Metro. This is the trail into the old growth, and it's gonna disappear. It doesn't last very long because it's untrailed. Here is a western hemlock growing straight out of a fallen Doug fir or western hemlock. Could be either. But then also the red huckleberry just growing straight out of it. And they call these nurse logs. Also a Nootka rose growing straight out of it. But the nurse logs are a hallmark of old growth forest, showing the kind of continual process of decay and growth happening, that there's a lot of nutrient cycling going on, that each one of these giants that falls and dies then becomes the nutrient base for the next generation as it grows up, giving a boost to the young hemlocks as they become giant trees themselves. When I moved out to my property in the very beginning of 2017, I began to walk around in the forest, and I knew that my property ended and that the property behind me began. And so I did some looking on the internet and realized that it belonged to Doug Silton. And I was like, okay, I'm going to introduce myself. And at first I wrote a note and sent it in the mail so that it would get into his mailbox, and saying I would like to meet you. I'd like to arrange a meet and greet and say hello. And to my surprise, he responded. And I was like, all right, we're gonna have a meet and greet. And I came up and was able to, Doug was dancing. And I was like, wow, who is this guy? And so Doug had introduced himself as a professional dancer. And I was like, that is phenomenal. It's a whole world I don't know anything about, but I was very interested that he was a professional artist. And so maybe he would be open and amiable to my quest, which was to gain access to walk around in the forest and to be in the forest and conduct an informal study with trail cameras, which seemed kind of invasive to just come up to somebody I didn't know and say, I'd like to walk around on your property, but I'd also like to put cameras up and track some animals. And so, but he was trusting, and he was gracious about it, and he said, sure, see what you can find, and let me know. And that was the beginning. And for me, like, I was spending day after day in the forest, whether it was with my young son Johnny, as he grew up, and I would take him into the forest. I trained my dog and was able to expand his range through the forest, but running this camera study where day after day throughout the months I was just letting the cameras roll and seeing what kind of footage I could get, and was quite surprised to find mountain lion, and surprised to find black bear, and most surprised to find mountain lion though. The idea that there was this very large carnivore predator that was living essentially in my backyard and going through Doug's yard for sure, because I had the footage. But if it was in Doug's yard, it was probably coming down into my yard too. And it was humbling, coming from the city and being in an environment where maybe the coyote was the most wild thing running around, But to come and realize that the forest that was in my own backyard had predator carnivore large enough to kill me, for sure, if they wanted to. And so it helps with the respect of the land to know that it is certainly alive and it is certainly more powerful than I am. And that through my studies to gain further respect for the animals, because I can see them and because I can watch what they do and get a little glimpse into their world, and to know that hey, the black bear is back there now, because a lot of these animals pass through and you don't see them all year. And I after 5-6 years of doing this study, I'm able to get a sense of when the elk come and when the elk go, and when this mountain lion moves through, and is it multiple mountain lions. And so, you know, I've gotten to watch coyotes cycle through litters of pups, and deer and elk for sure, and the family structure of elk as the young start to grow their antlers out before they're kicked off on their own, and to watch them in their habits and their habitat and gain that little insight. It's all been really wonderful, but a lot of it I owe to Doug. I owe this gratitude that he allows me, because you don't have to be like that out here. A lot of people are private about private property, and so I don't think Doug wants everyone to come, but he was gracious enough to allow his neighbor, and I think that's really cool. Has these scratches on it, and when I first saw it they were redder, but the bear comes in and scratches and scratches. It's not just one scratch, it comes in and kind of hits it a couple times, and it had in the past, like way in the past too, and it's how the bears say I was here. Thanks for doing this.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, this has been fun. So just for the people at home that, you know, I approached you to do this project, and I'm going to call it a pandemic project because,
sure.
I mean, I feel like because we were both home,
home a lot.
It made it, it made it a lot more possible, you know, because you're not off doing what it is that you do. And that's going to be my kind of lead question, you know, was that, you know, when I first met you, I knew that you were a creative artist, and I found you to be a very personable person. Friendly and nice, but I came to find that you've lived a very interesting life, and I just want to, you know, this is your time to share a little bit about your career, and I'm gonna also put you on the spot and talk about the prices. No, not the Price is Right. About Wheel of Fortune.
Oh yeah.
So you've lived a very interesting life, and it started early, so. Please share a little bit of that.
So I was like honor roll kid in junior high.
Okay.
And I was 12 years old, and I was selected because of my GPA to attend a taping of Jeopardy. And when I went to the taping of Jeopardy, they're like, hey, if you want to audition for Wheel of Fortune, here's the number to call. And I remember I wrote it on my shoe in pencil, and it took me I had to figure out figure out the number and dial a bunch of different ones. But I got to audition for Wheel of Fortune. Even though I was 12, I was going to be on Teen Week. And I got on the show, and I won my day, and then I came back for the end of the week. And I was like this stylish 80s, you know, like I had the sleeves rolled up on my sport coat, and yeah, it was a fun experience.
You know, the weird thing is, since we're basically the same age, I watched that with my mom. And I saw that you posted it on Facebook like in the last year or so.
Oh, like you saw it when I was on it?
When
like,
back then,
yeah,
I saw it. Yeah, because Teen Week, and I was like rooting for you. I was like, because like, hey, this guy's my age. You were up there against. There were some girls, and anyway, I picked you. I was like, he's my guy. I'm gonna root for him.
World.
And so that was something. But
the guy who beat me on the last week, Alec, he missed the first one. He was supposed to be on like the month before me, but he was taking the SATs. Oh. So we got a high school kid taking SATs against a 12-year-old, and he finally beat me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, besides your game show career,
yeah.
Just a little bit about your dancing and travel career, because you've been kind of all over the world.
Yeah. So 71 countries. An artist/athlete, and I. My career has been as a dancer and choreographer. I've done some movie and TV work, but where I find my passion is sharing how to best share, how to do lead follow as a partnership. And my specialty for the last 20 plus years has been detailing like human anatomy mixed with cohesive kinesiology. So it's how I can best have a conversation with someone if their eyes were closed and my eyes were closed, how I can move their body and they can move my body, and how we can create art. Okay. So, and then I took that and moved into the conceptual video art realm. So my favorite medium is video instead of live stage. I do live stage performances also, but on video, I can have multiple takes and format my art the way I see that it should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I felt that the timing was wonderful, even though it was very sad for all of us to have to stay home all the time, that, I could approach you about a project that was extremely local, because here we are, neighbors, and not going anywhere.
And usually I'm on the road 40 plus weekends a year.
Right, unavailable.
Conventions, circuits, and I'm, Thursday to Monday I'm out, and then I'm back and I'm working here, and his time is limited, and happily now we have time to do this. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for asking me to be involved in this.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So how long have you, if it's 2021 now, how long have you lived at this property?
I think it's been 8 years. Oh, wow. I think I bought it just over 8 years ago. And I feel very fortunate with the price that just dropped on the property, and I spent 5 days with my late wife looking for properties, and I fired 5 realtors. Like every time they take us out, and then be like, I can find all that info on Zillow. And then we found this property on our own, and it had ties to the family, sort of. The guy who owned it before me had started the Good Shepherd Church, which was the largest church in the area, and Nikki had ties to that. And the realtor she went to kindergarten with. So I found the property, and the realtor was the grandson of the guy who lived here.
Oh, okay.
And he took us on a tour down into the forest, and he showed where he used to play as a kid, and we actually saw elk the day he was like giving us the tour. And I was like, yes, I can live here forever. And coming from Los Angeles, like, this is so foreign, but it's so amazing, and there's no other place I'd want to call home except for here.
So can you speak to your long-term vision of living at this property?
Oh, well, the Silton estate set on 29 acres. My long-term goal is to enjoy being in nature. That's pretty much it. I see this as a very happy property, very happy place, and I like to share that happiness with others. For me, my normal is I go for like a little nature walk in the morning. I sit and I watch the mountain for sunset, and just a lot of like nice chill reading time, and then a lot of creative time where I have the space. There's no sound issues with neighbors, and I can create and move about. Yeah,
there's definitely there's a lot of freedom out here.
It's limited in some ways because of the zoning that we're in, but that zoning is great because it's going to protect everything more.
Right. The zoning does protect it. Freer than living in Southeast Portland.
Yes, and freer than living in Pasadena, California.
So this kind of ties into, I feel lucky to have you as a neighbor because you could easily have been someone who didn't want an ecologist taking walks in the property and studying your forest. And so when I first approached you about setting up cameras, what was your reaction? Because I felt like really nervous about it and was like, I don't know if this guy's gonna be like, worst he could, he could say no, and that'll be that. And that
I thought it was super cool because it's something that if you have the time to do that and manage it, I think that's great because that's something that I would like to do if I had the time to do it. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. When the last guy owned this property, there were some paintball groups who used to use it.
Oh yeah, well they lived at my house.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
So, and the grandson had to kick him off, the course. And
they called it OK Mountain.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
There's some old videos on YouTube.
I was like, no, I don't want this mess. I don't want the chaos. I don't want a ton of people. But a neighbor doing some good ecology work, to me, that's
right?
what this
I'm pretty
is about.
quiet.
That's what this is about.
I've had to do a lot of cleanup from the paintball course. So a lot of my restoration work on the property, on my little chunk of the forest, has been taking down their barricades and allowing the forest to grow back because they were very popular actually, I guess, for a paintball group.
They had a website.
Yeah, and they had maybe 30 people on a weekend show up and they'd trample the forest and everything grows back, but my approach is so much lighter.
They offer to keep my trails clear and I'm like, no, I can do
that. Right. When you first moved here, you spoke of seeing the elk, but did you expect that there would be bears and mountain lions and bobcats?
No, and especially with my puppy, I'm like, I really have to make sure she's not out on her own. I expected coyotes, but yeah, it's awesome watching the hawks and there's bald eagles and there's owls on my property, and then knowing that they're bear and mountain lion, I'm like, well. Yeah, that's a whole nother level of forest. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's been cool to capture that and be able to share that, but I wasn't expecting it, and so I'm very curious to know how others react to the idea that there are large carnivores that are just in your backyard.
Yeah, I was used to there's apple trees right here outside my studio, and Arden had planted those for the deer and the elk to come up and enjoy the apples, and he wanted, just like me, to shoot them with a camera, not with a gun. And so I enjoy looking out the window and be like, oh, the deer are back, the elk are back.
Yeah
I see a lot more deer than elk. The elk are a little more skittish during the day, I think.
I find them to be elusive, like I was saying, it took me a while to actually get footage of them. And to actually see them in person, it happens mostly at night. I don't often see them in the day.
I was driving in once, this is maybe 5 or 6 years ago, into my property with a long driveway, and there's this fog mist, that settles, but it's on my field, and I counted, I think there's 12 or 13 elk, in this front field. I was like, oh, stopped the car and watched, and then they moved away, and I was like, oh, it's so beautiful.
Life out here and my own experience and watching my neighbors and those around me, it's not always easy. With these levels of the Sandy River Canyon, in my head, I think of it as living on the edge. But your own experience has been, from an outsider, it's a series of unfortunate events. I mean, that your house burnt down.
42 years of everything gone, or I guess 40 at the time. So I was in Myrtle Beach at a dance thing, and I got a call. I've been gone maybe a week, and they're like, yeah, your house has been burning for 20 hours. 20 hours? My other neighbor Dave is Captain Multiple Fire. How is this happening? And there's really no water source. There's no fire hydrant, so the firemen, it was from 3 different counties, and they'd be going down to the reservoir and down and filling up and coming back up and trying to fight this fire with this these pitiful streams of water. And Dave he sent me video while it's happening, because I was like, I'm not flying home to watch my house burn. I'll get home at some point. But yeah, everything just went up, and so it's been 3 years of the permit process and building, and now I have a full-on sprinkler system in the house, pressurized sprinkler system. So if something were to happen, God forbid, then the sprinkler system will do its thing.
Wow, I didn't realize that there was the sprinkler system issue. We watched it burn.
Well, no, now I have a sprinkler system.
I know, but back then the
didn't have
previous
it.
one didn't.
No.
And by we, I mean me and my family, but like people were lined up on the road, on Lusted Road, looking up the hill and seeing this fire happening, and feeling kind of helpless, because I sent you a text as well and was like, your house is burning, you know, it's crazy. But here we are. It's like you have moved back in, and the
as of 4 days ago now.
Right.
The 3 years.
3-year rebuild, and it's just one of those things that life out here is beautiful, but it doesn't seem easy. That I noticed tragedies happening at a greater rate perhaps than I knew in Portland. That in the city I didn't know my neighbors going through so much on a regular basis, and
how back roads, I mean, the speed, you know, people speed through here because there's no speed limits posted.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's 55 because I've been pulled over. But like, people like, there was a tragedy on my property a few months ago.
Oh yeah,
The girl went right off the road, and you know, who knows what caused it, but the medical examiner was like,
she died.
She died.
Yeah. It's just that kind of added to my cache of things that like, wow, like, you know, this is an extreme area in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That life and death is happening all the time out here.
Yeah.
And so you seem like a very resilient person, though, that you've gone through a few tragedies. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to speak that, you know, in the same year that you also had
my wife passed away.
Your wife passed away.
That was almost a year. It was 11 months before the fire. So it was like one, then the other, and then like, So, but what's really great about being out here is that you're just in nature. So it's very like therapeutic.
Oh yeah.
Just to like walk outside and be like, oh, look at the big trees. Like life is pretty not fragile, and it's just big. Like there's so much nature that whatever happens to us is like, as long as that's there, it's like of no consequence to us. That does its thing as long as we don't hurt it.
Your resiliency and just basic good attitude have been an inspiration. That the whole time I've known you, I've been like, this guy has the best attitude.
I work on reframing a lot.
I think I just think it's great, and that it's definitely helped me in my own personal life to be like, Doug has a good attitude, you know, like it is important that you gotta face the day with the right attitude. And so,
and like some people say the glass is half full or half empty, or like it's still a glass, and even if it's just air in there, it's still a glass with something. You can fill it however you'd like, or leave it empty, and it can be beautiful empty.
That's true.
I just thought of that.
It can be beautiful empty.
Yeah.
And just thank you for taking the time to not only help me with this project, but to be in the project, and also that you've allowed me access to a whole world that has certainly kept my happiness going since I've moved out here, to know that I don't have to be afraid of my neighbor, and that my neighbor is a welcoming person.
At least not this neighbor. The other ones, you never know what's going on.
It is East Multnomah County.
Yes.
But it's generally the people. The people are pretty nice, and but just to be an ecologist and have access to a larger forest is it really is a wonderful thing. Nature is quite healing.
Yeah.
Evidence of the old forest that was here, like that burned, and they left it. And now it's just full of all sorts of lichens and mosses. And you get the new forest growing all around it.
My name is David R. Shapiro. I like to throw the R in there because there's a lot of David Shapiros out there. It's kind of like being Bob Smith. I wanted to talk about conservation, and hopefully this is somewhere towards the end of the movie, but that we've seen the forest and the old growth forest and the second growth forest and the third growth forest and the different animals that live within the forest. And the forest needs humans. It's kind of been that way for 200,000 years according to conventional dating, and probably 2 million years if you consider our relatives of the other hominids, Homo erectus and Devonian and those creatures, that people, things like us, have been living with the forest for millions of years, and that the forest is such a integral part of who we are as modern people. But we got here because of millions of years of interaction with the forest. And so the idea of protecting the forest, and we're kind of at this late in the stage game where so much of the native forest from Alaska all the way down to the redwoods of California has been cut and succumbed to logging at various levels. And so here we are with small parcels of forest that are still available for individual ownership through private property. And the idea that private property can help preserve the woodlands and preserve, even like I watch over the 3.24 acres of land that I have, where maybe 2 of those acres are the forest itself, and small parts come together to make a larger whole. And so we can all contribute in our own way to owning and managing the forest so that it is, productive for, when you think about it, what a forest does with the production of the air that we breathe and the filtering of the things that we make within our own society, and airplanes and cars and all of that. And the forests act as a sink for our own carbon and help to cycle around the oxygen into our own lungs and into the lungs of the deer and the coyote and the mountain lion and all of those creatures. And so we need to watch over the forest and encourage the forest to be there for the economy of the earth, that there's a whole economy of elements, oxygen being the most important one, but also the climate and the way in which weather moves around the planet. It kind of all comes back to the forest and the process of photosynthesis and the process of transpiration, where water is being pulled up from the roots and released through the needles, in this case, or the leaves. And that's all very important stuff for the working of the planet, for the health of the weather, for the continuality of life and the elements that make life possible. And so it looks like nothing. You're just sitting on land. You're owning land. You're watching trees do what they do. They grow. They reach a point where they can't grow anymore. They die. They break apart, and then they fall to the ground and become compost for the next generation of trees. And so it doesn't look like you're doing much, but you're making sure it doesn't burn down, and you're making sure that it's allowed to grow, and it's allowed to be what it wants to be as a forest, growing native plants and native shrubs, and working with that idea that each environment and ecosystem has its matrix of plants that it's most happy, it's best off growing those plants together. And so here, on Lusted Road, in this little tract of forest between my property and Doug's property, and then going down to Sam's property, and that Sam and his family were at it longer, starting in the 40s, and then galvanizing political force and money and the connections between media and people, and creating this conservation effort to protect the Sandy River Canyon, that a small number of people can make a huge impact on the world, and that a small number of people can watch over the land and the forest to help it be the best forest that it can be, and be the home for the animals, and be the producer of the elements that we need for life and living. So I do want to make a personal appeal to people of my generation that something that you can do is buy land and manage it responsibly, and see what happens from there. Keep tabs on it and take information whether it's photographs or trail cams like I like to do, or studies, but watch your forest and learn from it. Managing a forest will change the planet, because the more forests that are maintained privately and responsibly, it will change the flow of oxygen and carbon, and the idea that the more intact forests that we have, the more forests striving to become old growth. And since old growth takes hundreds of years to mature, it takes generations of people to make sure that a forest that's been cut down can re-achieve old growth status. And that will change the planet. That is something that humans can do to help restore a lot of the balance and help restore the earth that's been cut apart by so many years of development and industrialization.